Hello everybody, my name is Jim Lazy and welcome back to Lazy Jim. Now today I'm going to be building my computer. Now there is another intro in this video, but I wanted to mention some things very fast. I want to just make it clear that this is my first computer. I haven't done this before. So basically I started from square one, learned how to build a computer by watching videos and just teaching myself, and then going on to building the computer, buying the stuff, finding the stuff, and just gotta say it was rough because coronavirus, having to find the parts, everything was overpriced. It was just a very tough time building and finding and paying for all these parts. So that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention is the actual video itself. Um, yeah, again, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just gonna make that clear because again, this is my first time. So if you're watching this video thinking it's gonna be a good tutorial video, I wouldn't say it is exactly a great tutorial video. Just me explaining my process for the most part. So again, it's gonna be a little bit rough, and I'm not gonna know what I'm. It's gonna sound like I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't really know what I'm talking about. This video is just meant for critique and everything. So if you guys see me do anything wrong, basically just leave it in the comments and tell me, hey, you messed up here or whatever. Besides that, one last thing, the audio in this video, it starts off very low, kind of weird sounding, and then it starts sounding more like this when I'm speaking like right now. So maybe this sounds weird too, but I don't know, I've never been good with audio. So yeah, it's gonna sound different at the very start of the video, then halfway through the audio changes with everything. Anyways, that's all I really gotta say, I think, and yeah, I hope you all enjoy the video. Hello there, my name is Jim Lazy and welcome back to the Lazy Gym. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different from what I normally do. Today I'm going to be building a gaming computer. Now the computer you see in front of you is actually my first computer that I had bought like 5 or 6 years ago, and it lasted me a bit, but I didn't really put the money in the right places and it just didn't last as long as I would have liked it to. It didn't really perform the way I wanted it to, and it overall was okay, but just not the best experience that I would want. Now, I'm not saying it's anything to do with iPad it's more so my fault, I just didn't do the research. So I wanted to make it up to myself and make sure I made the computer myself. And this is my first time building a computer, and yeah, it was a journey, to say the least. But anyways, I did pick out every part. I did build this all by myself, and it was fun for the first time. But Jesus, it was rough. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking now, and I'll let you guys watch me attempting to build my first gaming computer. Alright, these are all the parts to the computer that I'm building, and this is my lovely case. It's a ASA 802 Cube, or ASA Cube 802, I don't know. Anyways, yeah, everything again I picked out myself. Cube, the GPU, 2080 Super, everything in here. I'll go over the parts more into detail, I guess, what I got exactly as I'm building, but yeah, that's everything. Alright then, so the first thing I'm gonna do is unscrew all these from the panels. So there's a total of 3 panels here, and there's 4 screws on each of the corners of these panels. They are glass panels, so once I'm done taking all these panels off, I'm gonna be putting them into the box that my case came in. So just to keep them safe, because again, since they are glass, anything that hits them will probably just shatter the whole thing. So I just want to make sure they stay safe in the box that they came in. The next thing I'm going to do is unscrew this panel off of the case. This will open up the second chamber, being able for me to put in the power supply, and it also just holds the SSDs and hard drive on that little panel. So I'm going to go ahead and take it off. Alright, so the first thing going into my computer is my Samsung 860 QVO 1TB SSD drive. Yeah, I'll be leaving this in my description, all the items I'm going to be putting into my computer, so just so you guys can see what exactly is going into my computer. Anyway, so the way to install this onto the computer is these little screws right there, or the little mounting holes right there. So you're just going to take this little panel out and kind of just line them up onto those little holes. So there's two ways to put it on there, the far left and the far right option. So you can just see exactly how it goes in there, just like that. So you basically just flip over the panel and just screw it in as so. This is my 4 terabyte, I forgot, 4 terabyte Barracuda Seagate hard drive, mechanical hard drive. It's kind of the same thing. You just gotta find the holes in the back and then line them up with that, the holes on the little panel. These screws actually came from the case, so I'm using those screws to bolt down those SSD drives that I have and the mechanical hard drive. So as you can see, I turned around that little panel and I'm just lining up the holes with the SSD and I'm screwing them in. I'm just starting off with my hands and then I finish it off with a screwdriver. Once that's done, it'll look like that, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with my mechanical hard drive. Just find where it goes. You'll find there's two ways of mounting again, 4 on the back and then 4 on the side, just like the SSD, and you just gotta find the way that it fits on there. So once you actually find how to put it on there, again, you just turn around and do the exact same thing you did with the SSD. Alright, just before I go any further, I just want to say I already made a mistake here. So I already mounted these onto this panel when I shouldn't have. I still need to connect the data cable and the SATA cable, and the thing is, since I already screwed these on, it's such a tight space, it's kind of hard to attach those cables onto these cards because, yeah, just a tight squeeze. So because of that, I did have to take these back out later on in the video and put them back in later, so just a heads up with all this. Alright then, the next thing I'm taking out is our Corsair 850 watt RM850X power supply. Now I'm just going to say this, a lot of the things I got were very difficult to find. Again, we're around the time of coronavirus and finding parts was really difficult. Either things were out of stock or overpriced, but after several months, this was the last part I actually bought and the last thing that came in, and it was a struggle to find. But yeah, so this is the power box or whatever you call it. I don't know the name of things, so this is the power box. It also comes with the power cable and then a bunch of other cables. And yeah, this is very, I'm happy that I got this one because I always hear a bunch of good things about the Corsair line. So I'm happy that I managed to find something at least, especially a Corsair power supply. Gotta love the sound of Velcro, right? Alright then, so the next thing I'll be doing is plugging in my power supply into the wall. So I'm plugging the power cord into it. And I'm also going to be attaching my handy dandy anti-static wristband and attaching it to my power supply as I work. So I always hear this is what a lot of people do, is they plug in the power supply into the wall and I believe turn it on and attach your little anti-static wristband onto it. You can do it by wrist or put it on your leg just so it's out of the way. Now, I'm going to say this is another mistake I made. Later on, well, not later on, pretty soon, I put the power supply in the box, and I don't have it attached to my wristband attached to the power supply anymore. So what you want to do is, I believe you can just put it on your case. But again, I'm not entirely sure. You should probably look into that rather than listen to me. Alright then, so the next thing I'm taking out is my Z390 Aorus Master motherboard. Now, this thing was very nice looking. It also kind of matches my case, so that's another reason why I like it. Now, this case comes with some stickers and some handbooks, but I forgot that usually the motherboards come with the data cables that you use to attach your hard drives into the motherboard. And I completely forgot about that, so I actually spent hours trying to find this cord. Not hours, but like I was trying to see where the cord was, and it took me a long time to find it. Not hours, but yeah, it just took me a really long time. I actually took out the data cords from my old computer so I can use them, and then I remembered that they were in the very bottom of the box. So don't be like me. Your motherboard shouldn't cut with data cables to plug in your memory. And before we continue, here's some nice ASMR tape peeling for you. The next thing I'm taking out is my Samsung 970 EVO NVMe M.2 drive. It's 1 terabyte, and I was hearing a lot of good things about these SSDs. Like most people I saw building with these SSDs, or like the upgraded version, which I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, I wanted something faster for my computer, so I got this little bad boy. I'm not sure exactly how much it's gonna help, but you know what? Treat yourself, you know what I'm saying? So here it is. Alright then, so what I'm gonna be doing next is unscrewing this little screw from this heatsink. You just put the M.2 drive right underneath it, and mine fits perfectly under this one, so I'm just going to do it under this one. So once you unscrew it, you'll also notice a little tape underneath the little heatsink, and you're going to go ahead and peel it off. So I'll show you how that looks. So I got the little screw off, that's how that looks like, and I'm going to set it aside. The little heatsink should be easy to pull off, and you'll notice that little tape right there. So the reason why there's that little blue tape is because there should be some sort of, I think like a thermal paste or something on that side. It's a little sticky, so it just helps cool your M.2 drive. So whenever you put in your M.2 drive, you want to just slip it right in there. It should be angled like that. I believe that's what most people I've seen it usually looks like when I see people build it. It's just angled like that. So you do that, you push the thing down as you're putting the heatsink back, and you just try to keep it down as you're screwing in the screw, and it should be fine. Apparently the first time I did it wrong, so I'm not sure how I did it wrong, but I just did. And I guess I didn't push it in all the way, I believe. Anyways, yeah, just hold it in there and screw it on there, and it should be perfect. The next thing I'm installing is my G.Skill Trident Z RGB 32GB RAM sticks, 3600 megahertz I believe they are. And what you want to do first is pull back these little tabs there on the motherboard, and you want to find this little notch on the bottom and line them up with the notch on the motherboard. And for my case, there is 4 total RAM sticks, so it doesn't matter which way which order I put the cards in, the strips in. But if you have only 2 strips or 1 strip, I believe the motherboard wants you put them in a certain way. But because I have 4, I'm putting them in any way I want to do it. So of course, when you're putting them in, after you open up those notches on the side of the motherboard, for the RAM slots, you want to push down the card evenly on both sides, and that should make a loud clipping sound whenever you push them in correctly. And once you do that, your RAM is installed, and you don't have to do anything with the lips on the side. The clipping sound is actually the little notches on the side holding onto the RAM. The next item I'm putting up is my 9th gen i9 9900K CPU from Intel. Now this thing is supposed to be a beast for running video games, so that's reason enough for me to get this CPU. Now, when you're taking the CPU out on any CPU, you want to make sure you're not really touching the bottom of the CPU. I don't really think you want to touch the top of the CPU. You want to kind of hold it from the sides, I believe. So make sure you're very careful with the CPU. You're going to notice that the CPU will have a little triangle on the corner on the top left, or the left side of it. You'll probably see the little triangle. And you're going to want to make sure to match that up with your little CPU slot on your motherboard. So this is the little CPU slot. There's a little hand here. I'm going to pull it out and open it up. And you'll notice right there in the middle, there's a little triangle that will match with the triangle on your CPU. So the triangle is right there, and the other triangle is pretty somewhat visible on my board. It's a gray triangle, and I think I pointed at it right here. Alright then, so now we're going to install our CPU. So what we're going to do is make sure we remember where the triangles are at, and we're going to go ahead and drop it in. Now you don't need to push it in or at all, you just need to drop it in, and what I do is just wiggle it around a little. I'm not really pushing on it too hard, I'm just really wiggling it up very lightly. What you do next is push down your little thingy and pull down the little arm and put it back to where it was at before. Once you do that, the little card should come out. Now you don't want to throw away that little plastic bit. I believe the motherboard manufacturers actually need that if you want to return it, so you want to just keep that in your motherboard box. Alright then, the next thing I'm taking out is my AIO. My AIO is a Kraken X53 AIO. Now, they do have the new Z series, which is pretty expensive, and they are nice with the customizable AIO screen. But the thing is, they're kind of out of stock, and all the options they have are actually too big for my case. So this will do just fine. I mean, it's still very beautiful, so I'm happy with this decision. Alright, so now with this AIO, it comes with the two fans that you're supposed to attach to the radiator, the CPU brackets to help you attach the AIO, and it comes with the Intel one and the AMD one, and of course the radiator and the AIO screen. Alright, now that we got the AIO out, what we're going to do is we're going to take our motherboard and turn it upside down. We're going to take that little mounting bracket that came with the AIO, the one for my Intel CPU, and just snug it in there. So just move the little side things until it's in there. Alright, so what we're doing now is we're screwing in these little standoffs onto the motherboard. There's going to be 4 little holes on the motherboard around the CPU, and you're just going to go ahead and tighten them in with your fingers. What I do next is I take my liquid cooler, my AIO, and take this little plastic thing off the bottom. So the reason why my AIO has this plastic thing is because it came with thermal paste pre-applied to it. So with a lot of the AIOs or the air coolers, they don't really have thermal paste applied to them, so you're going to need to get your own thermal paste to put onto the CPU. But mine already has some applied to it, so I won't need any thermal paste on mine. Now what you're going to do is you can take the 4 corners of the liquid cooler. There's going to come with little corners on these things that look like this. And you're going to line them with the little standoffs that you installed by hand earlier. And you're just going to drop them in. So the little standoffs will go through the little holes. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take the 4 little screws that look like this, and you're going to screw them on to each of the standoffs. Now you never tighten them down one by one all the way, you do it slowly on each of the sides just to give even pressure going down. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the cables that came with the liquid cooler and I'm going to plug them into that AIO screen. So this is the type C connector that goes in there, it's for the USB. Connection on the motherboard, and then there's all these cables that are plugged into one big cable. It comes with a SATA cable, the fan header, and the NCXT cable, which is just for extra RGB. So all of those are connected to this one cable, and just plug it in right there. Okay, so I'm taking this little cable right here, and this plugged into one of those 3 cables that's attached to the big cable. So this is for my CPU fan. Now that's what it's called on my motherboard. It's going to be right above my AIO. It's right there. It has 4 little prongs, and it'll match with this little thing right here. You're going to want to attach it right into there, but you want to make sure not to bend those 4 little prongs. Now again, my motherboard calls it the CPU fan, but I believe it's called different things on different motherboards. So just look out for that. And again, you can just plug it in right in there. As you can see, it fits perfectly fine right there, but I'm not going to want to keep it there. I'm going to actually want to make sure this wire is tucked in a little bit better. I don't want it hanging out too much, so I'm going to try to basically tuck it in better so it's not shown as much. So I'm going to squeeze it through here, and I'm going to push it right underneath those little cords. I guess they're not the little cords, the big cords on the AIO. So it goes right underneath there, and I snug it in right in there. So I'm gonna pull a little bit, and it should have barely enough room for me to plug it into there. Alright, and I got it in, and it fits perfectly. Now it's not really standing out too much. It doesn't affect the rotation of the screen, and it doesn't, again, like, it just looks a little bit neater that way. There's probably a better way to do it, but that's the way I did it. I just snugged it right underneath everything, so it just is nice and snug, and it doesn't have all that wire just hanging out everywhere. And then I was actually going to peel this off, but then I remember I wanted to peel off all the plastic till later, so I don't peel this off. Alright then, so the next thing I'm going to be showing off is where to connect that USB header at. So this is the Type-C connector that you put into the AIO screen. It's gonna look, this is the other end of it. That's what it's going to look like, the one with the colorful kind of end. So at the very bottom of your motherboard, there should be a F_USB1 and F_USB2 slots right there. They're both labeled. So that's where this goes to. So you're just gonna plug them to any one of those. I don't think it necessarily matters which one you plug it into. And there'll be 4 little prongs on top and 5 on the bottom. So just make sure you plug it in correctly, in the correct way. Now you'll see that it fits in there just right, but I'm not going to actually keep it on there for now. I'm actually going to be unplugging it and basically routing it underneath so that it doesn't have this giant wire just hanging out like this. The next thing I'm doing is installing my power supply, but I do make the mistake of installing my power supply without connecting the cords that belong into it. It does become a problem later on where I have to reach in there and plug everything in, and it just isn't working out, so I have to take it out again. The next thing I'm doing after that is I am unscrewing these fans from behind my the front of the case. So I'm unscrewing them all. There's 2 sections of my case. I'm just unscrewing the ones on the top section. After that, I am installing my little standoffs for my case. Since I have a ATX board, I'm installing the rest of the standoffs for that motherboard so that it doesn't, it just stays stable. I believe there are some standoffs that come with a motherboard, but these standoffs came with my case, so I just used the ones that came with my case. Next, I am lowering down my motherboard onto the standoffs. Now my motherboard does have a back plate to kind of keep it safe. A lot of the motherboards don't, I believe, but just make sure you're not scratching the bottom of your motherboard. And I'm just basically trying to get a layout on where I want this to be and just line them up with the little standoffs. Each of the standoffs should line up with little holes on the motherboard where you screw in your screws to keep them, so you can keep the motherboard installed into the case. So you can see me screwing on there, on each of those little sides. And this is where they look like. I screwed on to there, one right there, one in the corner, and there's a few more places throughout the motherboard. Another place right in that corner, and the very corner over there, another one right there, another one in the middle, and there's just a few more I don't think I show, but yeah, just basically you want to screw those in wherever the standoffs are, just to make sure your motherboard is secured nicely and it doesn't fall off. Now these things what I'm messing around with are the RGB fan headers, or the fans, I believe, the fans and the RGB for the case. Now when I originally had the box or the case opened, all these were daisy chained correctly, but earlier, just to make things organized a little bit better, I did disconnect one of them or a couple of them, and I got a call and I forgot which one I disconnected to which one, and basically I plugged them in incorrectly, so later on I do have to like redo some of them to make sure that all the lights were going on my case, because yeah, some of the cases weren't, some of the cases, some of the lights, the RGB lights on my case were not going off, so I didn't connect it correctly. But yeah, all I'm doing here is making sure everything's connected in the right place, and I do mess up on this part. The next thing I'm doing is lining up my radiator with the fans on the other side that I unscrewed originally. So basically just take the screw and put it in there, and it should be long enough to basically attach itself to the radiator and not too long enough to make a hole in the radiator. So just screw it in, make sure not to screw in through the wires. Alright, so next things next, I'm going to be opening up my extension cables for my power supply. Now my power supply is fully modular, so that basically all that means is I don't need to use all the cables that came with the power supply. I just need to use the ones that I actually need. So basically you just plug in your cables that you need that came with the power supply into your power supply, and then plug in your cables or match them with the cables that you got with your extension cables for your cable mods. So I plug in this big cable into there. Once that's in, I'm gonna drop the power supply. That's what I'm gonna do next, and then I'm gonna drop it again. So basically, all I'm gonna do is you're just matching each of the cables. So the one with the cable mod is gonna match with the big one. So that goes with that, and I'm just gonna plug it in like so. You just need to use a little bit of muscle to make sure it gets in there nice and tightly. Make sure it's in there, and that's all you need to do with all the cables that you plug into the power supply that you actually need. So earlier in the build I made a mistake. I attached my SATA drive and my hard drive onto that little middle part, but I had to take it off because I cannot plug in these wires that belong from the power supply into those drives, because it just wasn't bending in the correct way. So basically what I had to do was I had to uninstall those hard drive and the SATA drive so that I can plug in the power supply cables into those hard drives and plug in the data drive, or the SATA drive, or the whatever they're called. I think it's called the SATA drive cables into there too. So I made a mistake earlier, and that just makes me waste a lot of time. Also, I didn't remember that some of the cables for the SATA drive and the hard drive go in the motherboard, that come with the motherboard, were in there. I was looking for hours and I just couldn't find it. So I wasted so much time looking for those things. Besides that, I'm just making sure everything I need is plugged in correctly, and I have everything I need. So I have one cable that comes with two 8-pin connectors. This one right here is one 8-pin connector and one 6-pin connector. That's for the GPU. That one 12-pin connector. And there's actually another thing I don't plug in here. It's actually for the RGB lights for my case, but I install it later on and I don't think I show it. But I do wanted to mention it because there's a reason why my case wasn't lighting up, and I didn't know why, and that was the reason why, because my case came with a thing for my power supply, and I just forgot to show me connecting it. What I'm doing here is I'm plugging in my two 8-pin connectors that come from the power supply into the motherboard. So at the very top of the motherboard there should be two little slots, and I think I'll zoom in later, but I'm just showing where it goes. So one goes right there, voila, and there's another PCIe 8-pin connector that goes right next to it, and it goes right next to it right there. Alright, so that's about both of my 8-pin connectors connected to the motherboard, and again that's at the very top corner of the motherboard, and I'm just going to push them in there to make sure they're not hanging out too much, but I'll make sure to clean it later. Next thing I'm doing is I'm getting that big 12-pin connector, I believe, and I'm snugging it in right underneath the bottom of the case, and I'm gonna slide it through a little hole on the right hand side of the motherboard, or on the screen it's on the left hand side, but make sure to snug it in there and curve it in, and you plug it into the 12-pin connector on the motherboard, which is on the right hand side of the board, right next to the right next to the RAM sticks. Then I'll do the same thing with the 6-pin and the 8-pin connector that goes to the GPU. I'll also be doing the same thing with the USB connector that I plugged in earlier. I'll be moving it underneath where all my cables are at, and I'll just put it through one of those holes on the right hand side. There is this NZXT cable that uses for the RGB, extra RGB, but I don't actually need it. The next thing I'm going to do after I said I was unplugging my SATA drive and my hard drive from that little plate, I'm finally going to be attaching these cables. So this is the data drive. I'm going to be snugging it in right there, and the cable right next to it is the SATA drive cable that you plug into your power supply. So what I didn't do before is I didn't do this, and before it was because I screwed it in, it was too hard to bend these cables to plug into these little drives. This one and the hard drive was too difficult for me to plug in, so I had to unscrew them and do this part first. So that's what I do. Same process, is just I plug those in and I screw them in the same way I did the first time, and it shouldn't damage the wires that you're plugging in right now. So again, just taking those little screws and lining them up with the SATA drive, and I do the exact same thing with the hard drive, just making sure I plug it in these wires before I screw everything in. The next thing I'm doing is looking for these two colorful wires. This is for the power button in the front. So the green and white wire will be labeled power LED plus and power LED minus, and the orange button will be powered SWCH, and I'll show you where to plug those in right now. So the first thing I'm going to be plugging in is the green and white wire, which is the power LED plus and power LED minus. Now you want to make sure that where it says that is facing down from the motherboard, and it's going to be plugged into these two yellow spots right there in the rainbow area. So these two cords, the letters should be facing down, and it should be connected to that yellow spot. It's right next to each other. Next is going to be this cord, which I said the power SWCH. This is going to be connected right next to the green and white cords, and again the label is going to be facing down. The next thing I'm going to be doing is connecting all my fan headers. Now these are the things that I had to connect all together and make sure they're all daisy chained together earlier on in the video. So there's going to be multiple of these plugins, and basically you're just going to be finding there's going to be multiple of them on the motherboard, and on my system they're called fans SYS, I believe, and there's multiple of them on the motherboard. So again, my board probably had around like 7 of them or something like that, and I actually used all 7 of them. So I'm just finding all my cords that I did earlier, finding these little connections and plugging them into the fans SYS on my motherboard. Plug into every one that I can use. I use the slot for, basically. This is that USB header from my liquid cooler, the one that goes on the very top of the liquid cooler. Yeah, I unplugged it earlier, but I'm plugging it back in where I showed last time, which is the USB slot right there. There's another cord that I didn't plug in earlier with my liquid cooler, and that was the SATA cord. Now all you're going to do is you're going to take the same cord that you plugged into your hard drive or your SATA drive, and it should have a little notch in between right there, and you just plug it into there, and it should be fine like that. Now that I got that done, I basically have everything I need to connected to my power supply. All the fan headers and RGB headers are connected. The only thing I didn't show myself really connecting, and again I mentioned this earlier, was a little cord that's supposed to connect to my power supply to those RGB header fans and lights. Basically that's what's gonna make my lights go on, I believe, and I just forgot to show myself recording it. I forgot to connect it before I close this off. So later on, after I stop recording, I actually open the computer and plug that little cord in. Next, what I'm doing is I make sure everything is getting pulled through that little hole that I pushed in through there earlier. This little cord is actually the data drive that comes from those hard drives and SATA drives. So there's a couple connections on the right side of my motherboard. They're kind of hard to see and show off here, but they're on the right side of the motherboard. They look like they match the ends that I showed off. Again, these are the same cords I plugged into the hard drive and the SATA drive, and there's going to be two of them obviously, because one goes to the SATA drive and one goes to the hard drive. And I'm basically just pulling them through that little hole and plugging them into the side of the motherboard as best as I can. Now that all that is done, it is finally time for me to plug in my GPU, but before I do that, I'll let y'all hear some sweet sounds of plastic wrap not coming out correctly. Maybe. Now that that's done, the next thing I'll be doing is unscrewing these 3 screws at the very top. There's like these little metal panels right there, so when you unscrew them they'll come off kind of easily. So I unscrew the first 3 so that my GPU has some slots in the back too, so that you can plug in things into the GPU without any problem. So again, these just pull off once you unscrew them. Now that that's open for all 3, I'm going to be plugging in my GPU into one of the 3 slots on my motherboard. So on my motherboard, there are the 3 slots right between the heat sinks, those big metal heat sinks on my motherboard where I put my M.2 drive. They're the little metal slots right in between those big square rectangular things. Basically on the bottom of the on one of the sides of the GPU there'll be a like a line of I guess yellow that's hanging out, and you basically want to slide that into that little slot. Usually you want to do it on the first slot from what I understand, so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to line up my GPU with that slot. It's kind of hard to get it in there because my GPU is really big and the case isn't the biggest to be fitting a card like this. It's definitely a tight squeeze, but I finally managed to get the GPU in there, and basically all I'm trying to do now is just find where that little slot's at, making sure not to bend anything. So once you actually find that little area to put the GPU into, you want to get some even pressure and push it in there, and it should click kind of nicely in there. After that, I'm going to be screwing those screws back into the spots where I took those metal panels off, and you're basically just screwing the GPU in place so that it doesn't like move around too much. Once you do that, you're going to be finally plugging in the 2 cords for your GPU. So again, for my GPU, it has one PCIe 8-pin connector and one PCIe 6-pin connector, and you're gonna see me plug it in the 2 spots right there. That was the 6-pin connector, or the 8-pin connector. The next one's the 6-pin connector, and that goes right next to it. After that, I'm just making sure everything looks nice and tidy, and I'm pushing that cord back into that bottom half of the case so it's not showing off too much. And that's it. Everything is plugged in, everything's ready to go. It's finally time to test if this thing actually works. But before I do that, I'm obviously going to be peeling everything off first, and I'll turn it on and show you how everything looks right now. ¿Cómo ya sabes? Okay, so that obviously was anticlimactic, but as you can see, everything is lit up, everything looks beautiful, and it is actually not working. So there was obviously a lot of things I messed up on personally, a lot of things that I didn't do quite right. But overall, I think the process I did was correct. There was obviously one big issue that I did that made my computer not run. Now it looks like everything's on, the fans are on, lights are on, everything is working fine. But when I plugged it into my monitor, when I tried to get it to post, nothing happened. There was no video on my screen. It was just black. Now usually once you plug in something, it'll at least send you to the post screen, but it just showed my screen just a black screen, or it was a no signal screen, which basically meant something was wrong. At first I thought it was my GPU, but it was not my GPU. It was actually my RAM. So I went through a lot of processes of trying to figure out what was wrong with my computer. I troubleshooted as much as I could. I got a bunch of help from my friends, and nothing was working. I couldn't figure out anything. I switched out the RAM. That's actually the first thing I did, was reseat the RAM. Basically took it all out, put it back in, tried different RAMs. I put the RAMs in different places, and it just wasn't working. I took out the video card and tried it without the video card. I tried a different video card from my old computer, and nothing was working. I could not figure it out. I did not know why my computer was not showing display on any of my screens. I tried different monitors, I tried different cords. Nothing was going right. I took out the CMOS little battery from my motherboard. That didn't go right either. Nothing was helping my computer out. Nothing was making it work. And I didn't know what to do. Until about a few days after I finished my build, I decided just to take it to somebody to see if they could figure it out for me. And yeah, apparently it was my RAM. So I guess I didn't seat my RAM correctly. But it's in there now, and my computer is actually working now. This is my room. That's my old computer down there. All my systems, my 2 monitors, my computers, as you see, there's actually a picture on my monitors now, where before nothing was happening. But this is the case. It is finally working. It is finally done, and I am loving it so far. I haven't had any problems. It's super fast, no latency whatsoever. Everything is snappy, and I just love it. It is absolutely beautiful. I do not regret building it, although I didn't necessarily do it correct all the way. I know I at least did everything for the most part right. I guess I don't know how I didn't plug in the RAM correctly, but I just didn't, and I don't know how I did it. I didn't exactly see what he did differently from me, but yeah, apparently I just didn't plug in the RAM all the way correctly, and I just don't know how I didn't do it correctly. I don't know. Alright then, but besides that, if y'all saw anything I did wrong, like again, if y'all can tell me how I plugged in the RAM incorrectly, go ahead and leave that in the comments. Go ahead and flame me, and definitely critique how I built, because obviously this is what this video is meant for. Not really a tutorial video, just me trying to look back and to see how I built my computer and see how I can improve on building computers in the future if I ever do. Besides that, everything's plugged in, everything's working. There's a little part that I didn't put in earlier that I'd mentioned to y'all, and there's another little thing for the remote control that I didn't plug in. It basically goes right next to the LED power, the power LED plus and the power LED minus cords, and all those other little cords in the bottom right of the motherboard. I didn't plug it in. It basically just controls the RGB and basically connects to the little remote that comes with the case. But besides that, that is the build. Anyways guys, that's gonna wrap it up. That was the end of the video. I know it was a long one, but if you guys can, leave a like, maybe subscribe, and definitely leave a comment in the comment section. I do love reading them. And yeah, that was the build, and I hope you all enjoyed. And as always, keep being lazy.
What do spirits say? What do spirits say in the darkest days? What do spirits say?